I think Saudi Arabia is always trying to make sure their aid is constructive, and a little bit we've got to make sure we're not completely cutting off aid. That the opportunity to lift people up, while we're absolutely no one wants to fund any sort of terrorist activity, that we're able to achieve both goals, avoiding those negatives while continuing that generosity. And I'm sure a lot of effort's been put to that. The areas we work, like buying vaccines, which is the Global Alliance for Vaccines, that a number of countries, including Qatar and Saudi Arabia, have supported, that's very clear because you can track exactly what's going on. So we're quite careful, and we're always offering opportunities where we have enough visibility that people can feel confident that both avoiding corruption and redirection of the funds is not a risk.
Now, when you're trying to raise money for the Arab world, for the world's Muslims, it's no surprise that you'd come here to the Gulf countries, of course, the Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE as well. And it's clear that even with oil markets where they are today, these folks are still ready to pony up.
There's so many challenges now, whether it's related to Syria or Libya, and are the Gulf states working as one? Are they in alignment with each other about these various issues? Are the Gulf states aligned with Europe and the United States about these issues? And these are very tough issues. I mean, it's not like somebody has the solution to ISIS and they're holding back on it, or they know how to build stable governance in Libya and they're holding back on it. So the relationship is probably more critical today than it's ever been.
Given what you saw over the last several days on your visit to Saudi and what's happening with the oil market, would you say that Saudi Arabia, despite their grand vision to diversify away from oil revenues, do you think they're moving fast enough?
Well, I think it's very hard to move away from oil, and understanding what the oil price will be over a 5 to 10 year time frame, there's massive uncertainty about that. I mean, it could go back up to very high levels, and people will look back and say, okay, what a smart thing it was to do, or it could stay at quite reduced levels. I don't have a particular prediction on that, but moving economies when they've had that type of oil dependency away, it's very difficult to do.
So a long road ahead, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, when you reform your education system, then the students who go through that, it's at least 15 years before you start to have the benefit of that. And so, oil's still going to be an important part of these economies for the foreseeable future. There are investments in education, but whether it's Egypt or Saudi Arabia, those education systems are not nearly at the level that they need to move away. The idea is that if we can raise $500 million, we can pay off the interest and have very, very generous loans. If we raise the full $500 million, then we'll have a fund with $2.5 billion. And our foundation committed $100 million. The bank itself has a grant facility that committed $100 million. So with the Qatar announcement today, Qatar Development Fund, we're halfway to our goal of raising the $500 million. So with that, we can go ahead, start doing grants this year. It'll include agriculture and health, infrastructure. And so the bank has a lot of country expertise. We have, particularly in health and agriculture, a lot of domain expertise. And so that means we'll work together and learn from each other.
Why was it so important to help the Muslim community now? Is it because you're seeing what's happening with the migrant crisis? Is it because of fears that they might be radicalized? What made it so important to tackle this now?
Well, if you look at where the poorest in the world are, about 40% are in the countries covered by the Islamic development banks. The goal is that if you do development assistance properly, that you have more stability, less of these situations where you have to just come in simply on a humanitarian basis to deal with the making sure the food and the healthcare gets managed.
So you're working with the Qataris, you're working with the Saudis. Now these are two countries where a lot of private money has gone to the support of radicals fighting in Syria, radicals fighting in Iraq over the last couple of years, and particularly even with the Islamic State. Do you see what they're doing in terms of this state action, working with your foundation? Do you see that as a kind of atonement?
Well, no, I'm not an expert on the funding sources for the bad things going on in the world, and I'm sure the countries, will do everything they can to make sure that money's not going to those things.
Now, speaking of how difficult it is to follow the money, I mentioned to Bill Gates that when we look at the Panama Papers, we've seen the King of Saudi Arabia, the former Emir of Qatar, and also the leader of the UAE mentioned. I asked him if he was surprised by those revelations.
No, I don't have any expertise in what happened there. I was surprised there were so few Americans.
Doesn't the tax system then prohibit it, really? Make it not worth it?
Well, U.S. citizens, whenever you file your tax return, you're asked to declare what overseas bank accounts and assets you have. It doesn't mean that everybody absolutely answers that question correctly. So it's not impossible that that might have come up.